The emergency alarm screamed through the research station's corridors, painting everything in flashing red light. Dr. Kira Chin gripped the edge of her workstation as the entire structure shuddered from another impact. 3 years into the war with the Vraxian Empire, she had grown almost accustomed to distant explosions and military drills. But this was different. This was close. All personnel, seal your sections immediately, Commander Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. We have a hostile life form loose on the station. I repeat, a Korthax has breached the outer ring. Kira's blood went cold. A Korthax, the Vraxian war beast that had torn through colonies and military outposts alike. Creatures engineered specifically to hunt humans, to smell their fear and track their heat signatures through solid walls. Her hands moved on instinct, slamming the emergency lock on her lab door. The heavy metal slid into place with a thud that felt far too thin. Through the security monitor on her desk, she watched the corridor outside. Empty, silent except for the distant sound of gunfire and screaming that made her stomach twist. The Vraxians had been transporting something through this sector when their ship malfunctioned. That something was now hunting through her workplace, and she was alone. Kira forced herself to breathe slowly. Panic was what got people killed. She had studied predators her entire career, from earth lions to the crystal serpents of Tau Ceti. Every predator followed patterns, even engineered ones. The gunfire stopped. The screaming faded. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Then she heard it, a scraping sound like claws on metal. It was coming from the ventilation shaft above her lab. Kira looked up slowly and saw the grate buckle inward. Something massive was crawling through the ductwork, something that shouldn't have been able to fit. The grate exploded downward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The creature that dropped into her lab was the size of a small transport vehicle, all muscle and dark gray scales that seemed to absorb the light. 6 legs ending in claws that scarred the floor. A head that was too large, with too many teeth visible even with its mouth closed. Eyes that glowed a sickly yellow in emergency lighting. Every instinct screamed at Kira to run, to hide, to do anything except stand there while a 2-ton killing machine oriented on her position. But she had nowhere to go. The door was sealed, and this thing had just proven it could go anywhere it wanted. The Korthax moved forward, each step deliberate. Its nostrils flared, taking in her scent. This was it. This was how it ended. Torn apart by a creature designed to hate her species. But Kira didn't run. Running triggered chase instincts. Instead, she did something that went against every survival mechanism in her body. She slowly lowered herself to ground, sitting cross-legged, and turned her head to the side, a submissive posture, non-threatening. She kept her breathing steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The Korthax stopped 3 meters away. Its massive head tilted, confusion evident in the way its ears twitched. It took another step closer. Kira could smell it now, a mixture of ozone and something organic and alien. She could feel the heat radiating from its body. The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth designed to shred armor. A low rumble came from its throat. This was it. But the sound changed. The rumble became something else. Something almost like a whine. Kira risked a glance from the corner of her eye. The Korthax had lowered itself, not into an attack crouch, but sitting, like a dog waiting for a command it had forgotten how to understand. Slowly, carefully, Kira turned her head to look at it fully. The yellow eyes met hers, and what she saw there stopped her breath for entirely different reasons. Intelligence, confusion, and something that looked almost like pain. The creature's tail, a thick armored thing that could probably break her spine, with a casual swipe, moved. Just slightly. A tiny wag, uncertain, hopeful. "You're not a monster, are you?" Kira whispered. "You're just lost." The Korthax made that whining sound again, and took one step closer. Then it lowered its enormous head and placed it on the ground in front of her. A gesture of trust from a creature that had been built to destroy everything she represented. Kira reached out with a trembling hand and touched the rough scales of its snout. The Korthax's eyes closed. Outside, she could hear Commander Hayes organizing teams to hunt the creature. But Kira knew something they didn't. This war beast wasn't hunting anymore. It was looking for something the Vraxians had tried to program out of it. It was looking for kindness. The first night was the hardest. Kira sat on the cold floor of her lab with a creature designed to kill her sleeping 3 meters away. Every small sound made her flinch. Every twitch of the Korthax's clawed feet sent adrenaline flooding through her system. But she didn't move. She had made a choice, and running now would break whatever fragile trust had formed between them. She had named it Ash, after the color of its scales and the dim emergency lighting. Naming it felt important somehow. A reminder that this was a living thing, not just a weapon. When morning came, Commander Hayes stood outside her sealed lab door, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Dr. Chun, we need to eliminate that thing before it kills someone else." "Open the door." "It hasn't killed anyone on this station," Kira replied, keeping her voice calm. Ash's ears had perked up at the sound of Hayes speaking, but the creature didn't move from its resting position. The security team shot first. It was defending itself. It's a war beast, a Vraxian weapon. It exists to hunt us. Then why is it sleeping in my lab instead of tearing through the station? Kira moved closer to Ash, placing her hand on its scaled shoulder. The creature's eyes opened, watching her with that same confused intelligence. "Give me 3 days. Let me study it. If I'm wrong, you can do what you need to do." The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Hay spoke again. 3 days. But if that thing shows any aggression, I'm vending that entire section into space. Understood. Understood. Over the next 72 hours, Kira barely slept. She watched Ash constantly, taking notes on every behavior and movement. What she discovered made her blood boil with a cold fury she hadn't felt since her brother died in the war. The scars told the first story. Beneath Ash's scales, she found burn marks from electrical prods, chemical burns from injections, surgical scars that spoke of modifications done without care for pain. This creature had been tortured into compliance. The second story came from Ash's reactions. When Kira moved too quickly, the creature flinched. When she raised her voice, even slightly, Ash would flatten itself against the floor in submission. These weren't the behaviors of a natural predator. They were the behaviors of an abused animal. On the second day, Kira offered Ash food from the station supplies. The creature approached the meal with desperate hunger, but stopped before eating, looking at her as if waiting for permission, or expecting punishment. "It's okay," Kira said softly. "You can eat." Ash devoured the food in seconds, then did something that made Kira's throat tighten. The creature gently nudged her hand with its massive head, the same way a dog might seek affection after being fed. When she scratched behind its ear ridge, Ash made a sound like a purr mixed with a rumble. The tail wagged. Actually wagged. "You weren't made to hate us," Kira whispered. "They made you afraid. They made you hurt. But that's not who you are, is it?" By the third day, Kira had formed a theory that would change everything. She accessed a medical database and cross-referenced Ash's physical structure with known species from Vraxian-controlled space. What she found was damning. The Korthax weren't created from scratch. They were modified from an existing species called Korthavi, peaceful herd animals from a planet the Vraxians had conquered 8 years ago. Gentle creatures that had been twisted through genetic modification and psychological conditioning into weapons of war. She presented her findings to Commander Hayes through the door's communication panel. They took a species that lived in family groups, that raised their young together, that had no natural aggression toward other species, and they broke them. The Korthax don't hate us naturally. They've been conditioned to attack through pain and fear. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Even if that's true, how does it help us? There are thousands of these things being used against our colonies." "Because conditioning can be broken," Kira said, her mind racing. "If we can deprogram Ash, we can prove that the Korthax can be saved. We can turn the Vraxians' greatest weapon against them. That's a big if, Doctor." "I know." Kira looked back at Ash, who was watching her with those intelligent eyes. "But 3 days ago, I thought I was going to die. Instead, I found something the Vraxians didn't want us to know. Their war beasts aren't monsters. They're victims." The alarm interrupted their conversation. New intelligence had just come through. A pack of 12 Korthax had been deployed to New Terra, a colony world with 2 million civilians. The reports were already coming in. Hundreds dead, thousands fleeing. Kira closed her eyes. Time had just run out. "Commander," she said quietly, "I need a ship, and I need to take Ash with me." Getting approval to take a Vraxian War beast onto a military transport was harder than Kira expected. It took 6 hours of arguments, 3 separate command reviews, and finally a direct order from Fleet Admiral Okoro himself before she was cleared for departure. Even then, half the crew refused to board the same ship as Ash. The transport's cargo hold had been modified with reinforced containment walls, though Kira insisted they weren't necessary. Ash followed her onto the ship without restraints, staying close to her side like a massive shadow. The creature's eyes tracked every new person with nervous energy, but it never showed aggression, only fear. "Easy," Kira murmured, running her hand along Ash's scaled neck. "They won't hurt you, I promise." Commander Hayes had joined the mission, though his hand never strayed far from his weapon. "You better be right about this. Doctor, if that thing goes berserk in transit, we're all dead." "It won't." Kira settled on the floor beside Ash, who immediately curled its massive body around her protectively. "The Vraxians control them through pain. We're going to reach them through trust." The journey to New Terra took 18 hours. Kira spent every moment working with Ash, carefully documenting everything she learned. She discovered that certain high-frequency sounds made the creature aggressive, its conditioning triggering automatic attack responses. Those were the Vraxian control signals, embedded deep in the Corthax's modified brain structure. She began playing different frequencies through her portable equipment, watching Ash's reactions. When the creature showed distress, she would stop immediately and comfort it. When Ash remained calm, she offered rewards from the food supplies. Slowly, painfully, she built a map of the conditioning triggers. On the second day of travel, a young engineer named Maria brought her daughter to see Ash. The girl was maybe 7 years old, with wide, curious eyes that showed no fear. "Mama said it's not really a monster," the girl said, peering around the doorway. Kira glanced at Ash, who had raised its head at the child's voice. "No, it's not. Would you like to meet it?" Hayes stepped forward. "Doctor, I don't think." "Trust me?" The girl approached slowly, and Ash watched with that same confused expression it always wore around gentleness. When the child reached out her small hand, the massive war beast lowered its head and allowed her to touch its snout. The girl giggled. "It's warm, and its scales feel like my grandpa's turtleback on Earth." Ash's tail began to wag, that same uncertain movement that appeared whenever the creature experienced kindness. The girl scratched under Ash's chin, and the deep rumbling purr filled the cargo hold. "See," the girl said to her mother. "Not scary, just sad." Those words hit Kira harder than any military briefing. A child could see what the Vraxian Empire had tried so hard to hide. These creatures weren't born as weapons. They had been made into them. But the moment of peace shattered when they received the updated reports from New Terra. The Corthax pack had reached the main settlement. Over 1,000 casualties now. The colony government was evacuating civilians to underground shelters, while the military prepared for a final confrontation. Hayes pulled Kira aside. "They're planning an orbital strike. 48 hours from now, they'll level the entire valley where the pack is cornered. We need a miracle, Doctor." Kira worked through the night, barely sleeping. She modified her frequency device, expanding its range and power. If she could broadcast her counter-signal across a wide area, she might be able to disrupt the conditioning of all 12 Corthax at once. Might being the critical word. The transport entered New Terra's atmosphere at dawn on the third day. Below them, smoke rose from burning settlements. Kira could see the military positions surrounding a valley 10 kilometers across. In that valley, through the magnified display, she saw them, 12 massive shapes moving with predatory purpose. "They won't let you walk in there," Hayes said quietly. "The moment you set foot in that valley, you're in a combat zone." "I know." Kira looked at Ash, who had become agitated as they approached the planet. The creature could sense its pack siblings, smell them on the wind through the ship's ventilation. "But I have to try." "Why?" Hayes asked, "Why risk everything for these things?" Kira thought her brother, killed by a Korthax attack 2 years ago. She thought of the hatred she had carried, the anger that had burned in her chest every day since. And she thought of Ash, sleeping peacefully with his head in her lap, finally free from pain. "Because they're not things," she said. "They're prisoners of war, and it's time someone set them free." The transport landed on the edge of the valley. Kira gathered her equipment, checked her counter-signal device one last time, and looked at Ash. Ready to go home? Ash stood, tail wagging despite the fear in its eyes. Together, they walked down the ramp and into the war zone. The valley was a graveyard. Kira stepped over broken buildings and scattered belongings as she made her way deeper into the territory the Korthax pack had claimed. Ash stayed close beside her, head low and ears flat against its skull. The creature was terrified, but it didn't abandon her. Military drones circled overhead, tracking their every movement. Commander Hayes' voice crackled through her earpiece every few minutes, warning her to turn back. She ignored him for hours until the orbital strike, for hours to reach the pack and activate her device, or thousands of tons of ordnance would turn this entire valley into molten glass. The first body she found was a Marine, torn apart with brutal efficiency. Kira forced herself to keep walking. These deaths were real. The pain was real. But so was the torture that had created the creatures responsible. "I see them," she whispered into her comm ahead, near the collapsed grain silo. 12 massive shapes moved among the ruins, larger than Ash, covered in scars from countless battles. Their scales were darker, almost black, and their eyes glowed with that same yellow light. But there was something else in those eyes, something wild and broken. When the pack noticed Kira and Ash, everything went still. The largest Korthax, a creature with a torn ear and a scar across its snout, rose to its full height. It had to be over 3 meters tall. The pack leader. It took one step toward them, then another, and the other 11 spread out in a hunting formation. Ash moved in front of Kira, not attacking, but standing between her and the pack. The creature's body language was submissive, tail low, head dipped, but it didn't move aside. "Good," Kira breathed. Show them what you learned." The pack leader snarled, and the sound was like metal tearing. The Vraxian conditioning was strong in this one. It had been hurting longer, killing longer. It stepped closer, jaws opening. Kira raised her device with shaking hands and activated it. The high-pitched counter-frequency flooded the valley, inaudible to human ears, but clearly affecting the Korthax. All 12 creatures froze, their bodies going rigid. Ash whined and pressed against Kira's side, but the creature had already been freed from the worst of the conditioning. For the others, this was the first time they had experienced anything but pain signals in years. The pack leader's legs buckled. It crashed to the ground, making sounds that were almost like crying. The other Korthax followed, collapsing where they stood. Their bodies convulsed as the conditioning signals that had controlled them for so long were disrupted, overridden, shattered. "Come on," Kira whispered. Remember what you were before they broke you." For 3 minutes, the Korthax writhed in what looked like agony. Kira's heart hammered in her chest. What if she was wrong? What if the conditioning was too strong, too deep? What if all she had done was cause them more pain? Then the pack leader's eyes changed. The yellow glow faded, replaced by something clearer. Brown, almost amber. Natural eyes. The creature raised its head slowly and looked at Ash. Really looked, with recognition that went beyond pack instincts. Ash made a soft chirping sound, something Kira had never heard before. The pack leader responded with the same sound, and suddenly the creature was moving, not attacking, but approaching with careful steps. When it reached Ash, the 2 massive creatures touched foreheads, and the rumbling purr that came from both of them vibrated through the ground. Siblings, Kira realized. Your family. One by one, the other Korthax rose. Their movements were different now, less mechanical, less predatory. They approached each other with gentle nudges and soft vocalizations. Some groomed each other's scales. Others simply sat close together, finding comfort in contact they had been denied for years. The pack leader turned his attention to Kira. She forced herself to stand still as the massive creature approached, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. This was the moment. Either her theory was right, or she had seconds left to live. The creature's nose touched her hand, sniffed, then, slowly, carefully, it lowered itself to the ground in the same gesture Ash had shown her that first night. Trust, submission, a request for the kindness it had forgotten existed. Kira's hand touched the scarred scales of its head. You're free now. All of you. That's when the gunfire started. Vraxian dropships descended from the clouds, their weapons already firing. The handlers had come to reclaim their property, and they weren't interested in negotiation. The pack leader's head snapped up, and for a moment Kira saw the old conditioning try to reassert itself. But then Ash was there, standing beside its sibling, making those gentle chirping sounds. The other Korthax gathered close, forming a protective circle, not around each other, around Kira. The freed war beasts turned to face their former masters, and this time they chose their own side. The Vraxian dropships landed hard, kicking up dust and debris. Armored handlers poured out, carrying shock prods and control devices that had worked on the Korthax for years. They expected obedience. They expected their weapons to return to the cages. They got neither. The pack leader roared, and it wasn't the controlled aggression of a conditioned beast. It was rage. Pure, justified rage from a creature that remembered its imprisonment. The 12 Korthax charged as one, not in a hunting formation, but in a protective wave. They weren't killing machines anymore. They were survivors fighting back. Kira dropped to ground as energy weapons fired overhead. Ash stood over her, shielding her body with its own. Through the chaos, she saw the Korthax tear through their former captors with brutal efficiency. But they didn't kill everyone. They disabled, scattered, drove them back toward their ships. These creatures remembered violence, but they were choosing mercy. The Vraxian commander, a tall being with purple-gray skin and coal-black eyes, raised a device toward the pack leader. Return to position. It commanded in translated speech. Obey Protocol 7. The pack leader hesitated. For a moment, old conditioning flickered in its eyes. Then it looked at Ash, at Kira, at the other freed Korthax gathering around them. The creature's tail began to wag, just slightly. It lunged forward and crushed a control device under one massive claw. The Vraxian commander stumbled backward, genuine fear crossing its face. Impossible. The conditioning is permanent. You cannot. The pack leader's roar cut off the words. The remaining Vraxian handlers retreated to their ships, leaving their commander behind. Within minutes, the dropships lifted off and vanished into clouds. Commander Hayes arrived with a full Marine battalion 30 minutes later, weapons ready for a firefight. What he found instead was Kira sitting among 13 Korthax, all of them resting peacefully while she checked their old scars and injuries. Stand down. Hayes ordered his troops, though his voice carried disbelief. Dr. Chun, what exactly happened here? They remembered. Kira said simply, they remembered what they were before the Vraxians took them, and they chose not to be weapons anymore. News of the New Terra incident spread through human space within days. The video footage of freed Korthax protecting civilians instead of hunting them changed everything. Public opinion shifted. Military strategy changed. And Kira found herself at the center of a movement she had never intended to start. Fleet Admiral Okoro called her to a secure meeting 2 weeks later. We've intercepted intelligence about the Vraxian breeding facilities. They have thousands more Korthax in production. If what happened on New Terra could be replicated on a larger scale. You want to free them all, Kira finished. We want to end this war without more bloodshed. The Vraxians built their strategy around these creatures. Without them, their military advantage collapses. Kira looked at Ash, who had refused to leave her side since New Terra. The creature was healthy now, well-fed and calm. Its scales had brightened to a lighter gray. Most importantly, its eyes showed peace. I'll need a team, Kira said, and we'll need to bring Ash in the pack. The other Korthax will trust their own kind more than they'll trust us. The mission took 3 months to plan and execute. When they finally infiltrated the Vraxian breeding facility, on the outer colony world of Draxus 4, what Kira saw made her stomach turn. Thousands of Korthax in containment cells, barely large enough for them to stand. Conditioning chambers where pain was administered in systematic cycles. Surgical bays where modifications were performed on conscious subjects. She activated her modified broadcasting device, now powerful enough to flood the entire facility with counterfrequencies. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of Korthax broke free of their conditioning simultaneously. The facility descended into chaos as the creatures tore through their cages and turned on their captors. But Ash and the new Terra Pack were there, using their presence to calm the newly freed. Showing them gentleness was possible. Showing them there was another way. The Vraxian military tried to respond, but how do you fight thousands of creatures you designed to be unstoppable? Within 6 hours, the facility was secured, and every Korthax was free. The Vraxian Emperor had no choice but to negotiate. Humanity offered sanctuary to all freed Korthax, and in exchange, the Empire would cease its aggression. The alternative was watching their greatest weapon turn against them across every front. Peace talks began within a month. Kira stood in the first interspecies sanctuary, watching hundreds of Korthax explore their new home. No cages, no conditioning, no pain, just open spaces where they could live as they were meant to live. Ash approached with the pack leader, both creatures' tails wagging in that way that meant contentment. A group of young Korthax, born free and never conditioned, played nearby. They would never know the torture their elders had endured. Commander Hayes stood beside Kira, watching the scene. "You did the impossible, Doctor." "No," Kira said, scratching behind Ash's ear ridge. "They did the impossible. They survived being turned into weapons and still remembered how to be gentle. They had every reason to hate us, but they chose trust instead." The pack leader nuzzled against her other hand, making that deep rumbling purr. In the distance, more Korthax were arriving from liberated facilities across Vraxian space. Each one broken in body but not in spirit. Each one learning what it meant to be free. They were made to destroy humanity, but they had taught humanity something far more valuable. That even in the darkest conditioning, even in the deepest pain, the choice to be kind could never be completely erased. It just needed someone to believe it was still there,